Today, I, Retro GM, and the nerdy dad have the privilege of talking to Russ, creator of the Retro Game Corps, pillar in the retro handheld community. We'll talk about life, the handheld market, and of course, the beginnings and future of the Retro Game Corps channel. Welcome back to BRB Gamer Podcast. I am your host, Retro GM, and with us today, taking a break from helping out tens of thousands of viewers through his channel and his website with concise reviews, guides, and device tips, Russ from Retro Game Corps. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Co-hosting with me today is the nerdy dad.
Thanks for having me on as well, Retro. Good to talk with you, Russ. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited to be on here. Thanks, guys.
So, if you would, Russ, tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. So I've, I think like with all of us, I grew up with video games, and for me, I'm a child of the 80s, and so we had like the Nintendo the first year it came out, like the NES, and so I grew up with a family of 7, so like 3 other brothers. And so we're always fighting over it. We didn't even get a second controller for years, And so I just grew up with video games and stuff. And then at some point I just stopped, probably right around the PS1 era. Like I never had PS1 or anything else like that. And I didn't really get back into it until later on, like, full adult and everything, like Xbox 360 time. And then I only did consoles and stuff. And, yeah, it was, just typical, nothing crazy or anything. I did start a blog and like a podcast with my buddies back in like 2007, talking about the Xbox and PS3 and stuff like that. And the other 2 guys, they ended up getting jobs in the video game industry. And so we just kind of closed everything down around 2010 or so.
Yeah, you kind of have to do that when, your core group kind of gets in too deep and can't really discuss what one is doing,
right?
In that kind of outlet. And to kind of go back, 7 siblings. Like, did you guys have feats of strength to get that one controller, or how did that work out?
Well, some of us, like, I had one brother just did not care about video games, so that was easy, But for the most part, we were actually really cordial growing up because my mom, she was like a hawk, It's like the moment we like started fighting about something, it was gone. She'd just pull the cables and that was it, and we'd lose it for a week. And so we were pretty good about not getting upset about things and that kind of stuff. So so kudos to my mom for that.
That's awesome. What was some of your key moments of like, man, video games are the bomb?
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, but one of my biggest like memories was when my friends like would bring games over that I'd never even heard of. It was all obviously pre-internet and stuff, and they just show up with some game like Mega Man 2, and I'm like, I don't even know what Mega Man 1 is, right? Let alone Mega Man 2, but it's just at my house now, and we have like one afternoon to play the whole thing, Or somebody would bring a copy of Nintendo Power onto the bus. And I remember just looking at it and being like, I can't believe these graphics are real. They're so lifelike, I remember Mario 2, when that first came out, I was like, this can't be possible. I couldn't even fathom something looking so good on a TV screen, And so that was probably, 1988, I think. So I was probably 3rd grade or so. And yeah, man, that was a big deal back in the day, was seeing that stuff. And I mentioned it in a recent video where I talked about my favorite games, but one of my friends, he got a subscription to Nintendo Power, and it came with a copy of Dragon Warrior. And that was the first time we ever had played a role-playing game before, And we spent weeks playing this game, and that was a really big deal. It was like, it wasn't just some sort of like skill practice like Mario or something like that. You really had to invest yourself into it, and that really clicked for me.
Yeah, I remember when I met that kid that had the Nintendo powered subscription, and it came with that, but it also came with a badge that you were a cool kid.
Yeah,
so
totally.
And playing the first game where you could actually save, was really big.
Yeah.
Because it was always, up until that point, I mean, there were games like Legend of Zelda where you could save and stuff, but your first experience with a game that you could save was always like, wait, I don't have to start all over if something bad happens.
That was me with Super Mario World. That was actually the pinnacle of video game. This is legit. I want to continue playing this, and this is amazing. I can continue my game of Super Mario World and actually beat it. That was the first Super Mario that I beat. I had such emotion when I finally beat it, and the music, and then the end, and thanks for playing. Oh my gosh.
Totally. Yeah. And I remember there were passwords, before there were battery saves, there were passwords you can input. And so the first Metroid had a password system.
That's right.
And man, once we found that out, we tried to game it, just try to make up gibberish and see if we could get further in the game, without having, because that game was freaking hard.
Trying to hack it.
Right. Yeah.
Too young to care about the math.
Right. And I had a very similar experience with Mario World too. When that first came out, and I never owned a Super Nintendo. We had the Genesis, and there was this neighbor kid. He was this new kid. And I think he was a couple of years younger than me, but we were talking about games on the bus one day. Everything happened on the bus for some reason. But anyway, we were talking on the bus, and he told me he had a Super Nintendo, and I didn't believe him because this kid was kind of like a liar, And I'm like, all right, I'll come over to your house and we'll check it out, And I went over to this kid's house, and it was just they were still moving in. It was just all really shady. We were all really poor, right? And Super Nintendo was $200, And sure enough, he took me into his bedroom. He had this rinky-dink TV and a brand new Super Nintendo hooked up with Mario World. And that was the first time I ever saw it in motion. And same thing, man. That was just an incredible experience.
Yeah, I didn't own that Super Nintendo. It was actually my cousin's, but we were staying at their place for a few months. And man, I loved being able to have my own save and finishing my first video game by myself without anyone's help.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
So you mentioned you got back in around the 360 era. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So what was the game that Godfather style brought you back in?
Wow, that's a good question. I hadn't really thought about that. So it was BioShock, the first BioShock when that came out, and I had just been reading about it and stuff, and I was just ready. I had a PS2 at one point, but mostly back then everyone used it as their DVD player because it was cheaper than buying a DVD player, and so I'd never really played anything. I think maybe Metal Gear Solid 2, that was 2001, but that was really about it. And so, but when I heard about BioShock and the ability to have freedom and make choices and stuff like that, it really resonated with me. So I ended up buying Xbox 360 and then BioShock on day one.
That's one of those pivotal games that really brought home narrative being important and integral and actually having impact for that era.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and honestly, the gameplay on that game is not great. It's a very loose feeling game. It's kind of cartoony feeling sometimes. But man, that story was it was worth it. I was hooked after that.
How did you start Retro Game Corps?
So I've always really enjoyed emulation, just this idea of kind of recapturing, old games. And so, for example, I got a Wii, back when everyone was getting a Wii, so 2007, 2008 or whatever. And I poured hundreds of dollars into that virtual console, to be able to replay all these games and stuff. And so I really liked that. And yeah, I ended up hacking it at some point and, putting my own things on there and whatnot as well. And then, when the Nintendo Classic came out a few years back, I grabbed one of those and I hacked it and stuff, just trying to kind of recapture that kind of fun. But I never really thought about a handheld. And then when the pandemic hit, I was at home, I was working from home and stuff. And I got real bored. I tried all sorts of things. I was like recording music. I'd started trying to write a novel. I was just trying to do all sorts of stuff. And it came to a point where I'd seen enough RG350 videos. I was like, finally, you know what? I'm just going to buy it. And so I bought it. I even bought it on the slow boat, like free shipping. Like I waited a month and a half for the dang thing to show up. And it showed up around July, 4th of July or so. And it took me probably 2 weeks. At first I was like, this thing isn't worth it. I hate the UI. You know, it just like, it didn't make any sense to me. You know, I never really used a Linux device or anything. It took me a couple weeks, and then something clicked, and I loved it. And that's when I thought, okay, it took me a long time to figure out how to make this thing work and to really unlock its potential. And if I hadn't have been home for 2 weeks straight, you know, working on it, I wouldn't have figured it out myself. And so I thought, well, let me make a website where I put all this information together, because the information is out there. It's just not organized very well. And so then I started making guides, and I wanted it to be a 100% written website. Like I didn't want to do videos or anything else like that. I was trying to keep it really simple, kind of making like a wiki page basically. And it came to the point where I realized I needed to start demonstrating some of the things I was talking about. And so then I started making videos, and then at some point the videos just kind of took over.
People come to your website, they can click your video. Does it still count as like the YouTube thing if they click your video link inside your website?
Right. And so, yes, if they watch the video like embedded in my website, it still counts as a view, I think. But that's, I think, been the key to my success, you know, and I totally was not expecting any of this. Like, honestly, when I started the website, and that was around late August, early September, my goal at the time was to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of 2020. And I thought that's probably a doable goal, you know. And what I think really helped was that I had a website and a YouTube channel. And so I could marry them like across each other. And so people, if they wanted to see the written guide, they could see the written guide. If they wanted to watch me explain it and everything else, they could do that as well. And they all just kind of feed into one another. And so it's kind of cool where I've had not only like this cool and unexpected YouTube success, but then my website too, like has gotten, you know, a ton of views too. And it's been really fun and beneficial from that way.
You are so helpful, Russ. So not only is your website super helpful, and I've used it multiple times, but the videos embedded in it help me get the visuals for whatever I need to set up, whether it's the 351p or even the RP2. But even more above and beyond is like the helpfulness that you are to the community on Discord, on the different Discord servers. You answer people's questions. They come looking to you as their helper, as their guide, as their sage.
Sage, that's funny. Yeah, honestly, it's kind of exhausting. Like I've always been a stickler for, you know, being a person of action, you know, and trying to help others and stuff. It's always been something that's kind of ingrained in me. And so I made some goals where I was like, all right, I'm gonna respond to every comment on YouTube and every comment on my website and every email I get. And then also every time someone pings me on Twitter or Discord or Facebook too, and Reddit. And so I made it very ambitious on myself. And while I was still working from home, I could do it. Like I was kind of running on all cylinders. But now that I'm back at work, man, it's been rough. I get home, I'm like, okay, I've got 30 minutes here. I'm going to carve this out and I'm going to answer everyone on Discord. And then I'm like, okay, now I got 20 minutes. Let's jump on Reddit and see how I can help. And it's hard because some of those platforms, especially Discord, those are meant to be like used in the moment. They're not supposed to be something you check once a day, you know? And so it's been difficult, but I really enjoy doing that. And what I've really loved, and I was hoping it would get to this point, and it kind of is starting to get there, is that people are just referring to me at this point where they're like, they don't need me anymore. Like I've put the guide out there and then people say, no, here's the guide. And then they share it for me instead of me having to do it every time.
That's me. I'm like, hey, check out this stuff. So you were telling me that you live in Hawaii. You've relocated there multiple times, and this is your second time living there with the fam.
Yes. Yeah, it's been pretty awesome. So I'm actually in the U.S. Navy, and I've been in for 21 years now. And I was lucky in that when I first joined, you know, I went through boot camp and school and all that stuff. But my first two duty stations, I was here in Hawaii for 7 years straight. And so I really put down roots here in Hawaii when I first arrived. And I met my wife like in the first year I got here. And we've been married now for, gosh, I don't know, 14, 15 years now. And then, like this became home, and it's weird, being in the Navy, you usually move every few years, and you start to lose the sense of home over time. And so, for example, I don't get homesick for where I'm from originally, which is Washington State. I don't get homesick for Washington anymore. I get homesick for Hawaii. And so we got really lucky that the Navy's priorities and my own priorities kind of aligned, and that we were able to get back to Hawaii. And so we've been back for a year now. And yeah, we're just so happy to be back. My kids are in Hawaii schools now. It's just super cool. They're going to the same schools my wife went to. It's pretty cool.
That is awesome. The same teachers too, huh?
The teachers they're long gone at this point, but his cousins all had the same teachers. And so like, what I mean? These teachers like, oh, you're one of those kids, they know the family, which is kind of cool.
So a lot of people think of Hawaii and they, picture as like sunny beaches, and, that's kind of the paradise view that people like gravitate towards and, want to be there. But for someone who's, been in the thick of it for a while, what draws you to Hawaii, and what keeps you wanting to go back to Hawaii?
Well, I will say, the beaches and like the natural beauty is definitely a big draw. I'm actually not a fan of hot weather, which is ironic, right? But like I actually prefer like spring and fall, and growing up in Washington where it's raining, 9/10 of the time, that's what I'm used to. And so here's a little hot for me. But what I really love about Hawaii is like the sense of family, the sense of community, and the food is just incredible. Like, this is a culture here in Hawaii where a lot of people, not recently, obviously because of the pandemic, but we're an eating out culture. Like people will grab takeaway or grab food and stuff like that. Not a lot of cooking happens at home, other than just kind of the basics and stuff. A lot of people eat out all the time. And because of that, there's a rich culture when it comes to eating out. And then prices are not bad either when it comes to food, just because of all the demand and stuff. Yeah. And so it is expensive to like, if you just hop into a grocery store and try to buy a gallon of milk, it'll be expensive, but that's not how people live here. They look for sales. They like kind of shop around, like people always complain about how expensive it is in Hawaii, but I've never felt that way.
This may sound stereotypical, but is spam as prolific in Hawaii as the world would lead me to believe?
Yeah, absolutely. So we got a case of it at all times at the house. We fry it up with breakfast or whatever. We actually live with my wife's parents. That was one of the reasons why we were able to come back, was to help out around the house with them. And they love their spam. I'd say probably once a week, if not once every 2 weeks, we have something that has spam in it. And it's just kind of how it is.
Maybe in the show notes we can include a favorite recipe of yours for the listeners.
Sure. Yeah, spam musubi is probably the famous one. It's like sushi. It's got like the nigiri sushi, like rice block, and then a piece of spam, and it's wrapped in seaweed. And that's like very, very. It's like a staple here. You go to 7-Eleven and they have those in the warming like containers or whatever to buy.
Just on the roller.
Yeah, exactly. There's no hot dogs or whatever. There's no burritos. It's spam musubi.
No tornadoes in Hawaii then.
No. Yeah, exactly.
They serve spam at McDonald's even.
Right. Yeah, you can get like spam saimin, and again spam eggs and rice for breakfast, and then they have saimin, which is like the Hawaii version of ramen, and they just sell that at McDonald's. It's got spam in it.
What's your favorite Hawaiian cuisine? Kalua pork?
When it comes to like local, like Hawaii food, I really love a dish called lau lau, which is basically like these, they take these lau lau leaves and they wrap them with pork and a little bit of fish, and then they just steam it for a long time. And so the greens become like they fall apart. It's almost like collard greens. And then it has like all these really fatty and delicious meat chunks inside. And so you're getting your vegetables and your meat at the same time. It's pretty awesome.
Good. So good.
Well balanced. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
So Russ, with your YouTube channel and everything, how I found you, I'd recently gotten a Retroid Pocket 2, and I needed help. And I was looking around, and I stumbled upon your channel, and I, watched a couple of videos throughout the week that you had on that, and then your RG351P video came up, and you said, quote, I got this device, and I haven't picked up my RP2. This device is so much better than that. And I had just gotten it like 3 days before and was fiddling with it. I was like, you know what? This guy might be onto something. When you do your videos, you make usage of it realistic. And you put us in your place, and we're kind of holding it and looking through it and stuff. And I no longer own a RP2. The RG351P looks nice. But for me, I'm looking for something a little more powerful than that. But that kind of leads me to, like, what are your thoughts on, the handheld market as it stands now? And I mean, looking at everything coming very soon, it seems to be moving at a fever pitch in terms of performance and devices. And what's your take on it?
Yeah, it's crazy that I just happened to, like, I got my RG350, and then, like, within a couple weeks, I ordered the Retroid Pocket 2, mostly based on, like, Taki's video and stuff. And it's been such a learning process for me, kind of going through everything. And I did it on purpose, but when I first turned on my Retroid Pocket 2, I did it on camera, and I hadn't really watched any other videos about how to make the thing work. And I wanted to have that really kind of like beginner's experience. And man, I got hammered in the comments about it. Like, oh, you forgot to do this, you forgot to do that. I'm like, well, the user interface didn't lead me to that moment. You know what I mean? And so that was kind of a big thing for me. And it's funny to talk about it in past tense because we're talking about like 3 or 4 months ago. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy to think that we're in a new era already. Like, we're past the Retroid Pocket 2 era or something, But that's how fast things move, because I had my Retroid Pocket 2 for about a month, and then the RG351P came out, and my channel was still like super small, and so I had to I tried to get in contact with Ambernick, said, hey, can I get a review copy, maybe get it early and stuff. They didn't even answer, so I ended up buying it the minute it became available, and I paid all the extra shipping costs to get it as fast as I could. So I ended up shelling out like $160 for my RP2 or R351P. And and then the same thing, if you watch my early impressions videos of the 351P, I didn't like it. I was like, I liked this thing better before I turned it on. Like, I didn't like it, and I had to learn how to make it work and stuff like that. And now I feel like, I could do anything with it, and so it was kind of weird to have that experience through YouTube and with people watching along with me, but when it comes to how it's coming next, I think at this point, you're probably in the right place where you're not buying a 351P because, gosh, I don't even know what's going to happen 2 weeks from now. What's going to be, kind of unveiled. And I do think that there's going to be a lot coming out in 2021 based on the feedback people have been giving with the purchases they made in 2020.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a big push for instead of the $100 budget retro game machine, it's going to be the $200 more powerful game machine that can do like Dreamcast well and GameCube well.
Mm-hmm. Man, I'm just waiting for that GameCube machine. That is going to be so awesome. Like, that's the one where it's like when I did mess around with emulation on my PC and stuff, I was always in Dolphin. Like, that's the one I really enjoyed playing and stuff. And so I'm really looking forward to jumping into some GameCube games at some point.
I feel like there's going to be like, you're going to get that one. You're going to be like, oh, this is great. And 2 weeks later, the other one's going to come out. And you're just like, oh, no, this one's great. And then 2 weeks later, the third one's going to come out. And it's like, no, this is the one.
I know. I'm not going to ever do a video like, like those videos where like, is this the best one of 2021? I'm never going to do that video. You know what I mean? Because I can never, I'm going to put my foot in my mouth. You know what I mean? I'm never going to be able to take that stance. And I have a bad habit too of kind of falling in love with every device I have, like, for example, I bought an RGB 10 over Black Friday, and I was like, I'm going to order this thing because it's super cheap right now. I think I got it for $60, and I'm just going to tear it apart, and I'm going to talk about why the 351P is so much better and stuff. And I even filmed some footage, and I was ready to do it and stuff. And then like a week later, it just clicked. And I was like, you know what? I actually kind of love this little thing, because it's significantly smaller than the 351P, which you don't realize until you have it in your hands. And that made a big difference to me. And so I'm still not done with it yet, but I'm working on an RGB 10 video where I'm going to say, hey, this thing's pretty cool too. You know, like I want to have a video where I say, you know what, this thing sucks, don't buy it. But I haven't been there yet.
I think the interesting thing too with the market now is everybody is very subjective with like what bar they want to hit with any given device, and it's such a moving target, which will lead the market to there will still be a place for some people for an RG351P or a RGB10, or even the, you know, Happy Meal grade, you know, ones that come out of China, because that still, you know, fits a niche for someone. And this market is extremely, extremely interesting, because when I sold my RP2, I had opened a drawer and I had a Moto G7, like just sitting in there, and like I face palmed. And I picked it up and I was like, okay, Android, what can this phone do that this device couldn't do for me? And it was more so like it was less fiddling, because the machine could brute force its way through the things that the RP2 had trouble with. And I was like, okay, well, I have, you know, my new phone, which is a Pixel 4a, which compared to like, you know, flagship smartphones is not the fastest, you know, horse in the race, but I can run Mario Sunshine at 30 FPS. I could run Metroid Prime at playable, stable frame rates. And it's kind of very much like, well, and this was before the major announcements that have happened recently. I was like, well, when does this trickle down? And we start having, you know, devices like the RP2 catch up. I did not think it would be when I came home from Christmas break.
Right. Yeah, it's overwhelming at this point. Like, I've seen some of these like teasers and stuff, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, how am I going to get my hands on this thing with enough time to make a video and then also make guides to help other people through it? You know, I just it kind of stresses me out. Like, China's stressing me out right now, man. They keep sending me too many things.
Sending. Did you get a little slip there?
No. I shouldn't say that. I mean, I did get one today, but it's like not anything big. It's the like Tri-Mui or whatever. You know what I'm talking about? It's like a little Game Boy shaped thing. I think it's been out for like a month or whatever. But
well, I mean, it's kind of humbling when you're a content creator and you get to a point when you hit that milestone and you're not. Even though, you know, it doesn't really matter who does it, like, you're not hustling out trying to get a response from someone actually comes to you.
Yeah, it's been kind of crazy, you know. I never thought that I would be having this moment happen so early, you know. It's kind of crazy, you know. The whole point when I kind of convinced my wife, I'm like, hey, you know, I'm going to spend some money here. I'm going to buy a couple devices. I'm going to have to buy some SD cards. I'm going to have to pay for a web domain, you know, that kind of stuff. But hopefully at some point I'll start getting free devices, you know. And she's like, okay, you know, do what you got to do. It's your hobby or whatever. But if I had told her, yeah, in 4 months, I'm going to have more packages than I can deal with, she wouldn't have believed me. And I wouldn't have believed myself either at that point. It's been crazy how receptive and enthusiastic everyone has been, not just the users, but even the companies and stuff. Because I think they just rely on content creators at this point to provide them all the marketing that they themselves can afford to do.
Again, it's kind of, you get to a point of being an influencer yourself, and, you know, it kind of led me into my next question. Like, how does it feel to be that person that is speaking for your audience, and, you know, your audience is telling you, like, man, that device is so great, but what if it had clicky, you know, sticks? What if, you know, it had a touchscreen versus not having a touchscreen? Like, and you being able to convey those points back to a manufacturer, and they actually take you seriously in what you have to say.
Yeah, you know, honestly, it's a little daunting. You know, it's really cool, but at the same time, I don't consider myself a hardware guy like the way, you know, like, you know, I listen to your guys' podcast with Taki, and it's like he knows what he wants and what he thinks will do well and stuff. And me, I'm still learning. You know, I'm literally like just saying like, Well, I don't know. Well, we'll try it out and we'll see how it goes. You know what I mean? Like when the Pocket Go S30, they sent me a prototype, and it took me like 5 days of messing around with it every day for hours to kind of figure out whether or not I liked it and what could have been done to improve it. You know, it took me a while to figure that out because I'm not there yet, you know, and so I'm kind of learning with everybody else. And so it's a little daunting, but at the same time, I like that my perspective is being like respected, you know, that regardless of how I feel about it, my kind of gut reaction still, I hope, is very similar to other people when they first look at it. You know, I like to have that beginner's kind of viewpoint. And at the end of the day, it's your first 5 minutes, you know, with a device in your hands, which I think really can kind of make or break a device. And I really try to focus on that part.
Truer words have never been spoken. You only get a chance. You only get one chance to make a good first impression.
Yeah. Totally.
And I mean, so here's the thing. I work in software development and I deal with users in all gambit of knowledge levels. So I want the super user's perspective on something that I've made to help them. And I want the guide to, you know, come in and basically say like, hey, I have no idea how to use this, and to me it's a piece of garbage already. But yeah, the opinion of the everyman is worth just as much as the opinion of the expert. So don't discount yourself in that. But yeah, so 2020 seemed to be good for you in terms of your channel and stuff. A problem that, you know, I see in every endeavor in life is how do you keep moving forward, and where do you think you'll find yourself moving forward in the channel?
Well, that's a good question, and honestly, I haven't really taken the time to think too much about that part of it. You know, at the end of the day, I feel like often I'm playing catch up, and so a good example is my guides on my website. So my RG350 guide, I personally feel that it's pretty watertight at this point. Like it is every aspect that somebody has an issue with, I usually have a link that I can just say, hey, I've already written it, you know. And it took a long time to kind of meticulously go through everything. But for the other devices, because by the time they arrived, I was already back at work and stuff, I just haven't had the time to really do it. So like my Retroid Pocket 2 guide, it's okay. You know, I've got a couple tips and stuff for getting Dreamcast and, you know, Nintendo 64 Nintendo DS working and stuff. But there's so much more I wanted to do with it. I never got a chance to, just because other things kind of got in the way. And same with the 351p. And that's been a different problem, is that the community changes, like the software changes, the firmwares are just keep going, you know. And so all of a sudden my guides, which were watertight, are now outdated. And so I'm not too worried about what happens in 2021, other than I just want to make sure I keep kind of juggling all these balls at once. I want to make sure that even as someone who gets the 351p today has relevant information, so that when they go onto my website, they say, okay, I want to update the firmware. What are my options and why, you know? And so I want to keep doing that. And I think I'll always be playing a little bit of catch up as these new devices come out. And I don't think I'll ever turn into those guys who, I love watching their channels, but it's just not me. It's like hey, I got this new thing. Here's 5 minutes about whether or not you should buy it. Like I like having those as like an introductory video, but then I'm going to spend the next month really diving into it to make sure you get the most out of it. And so I'm going to have to, I think in 2021, I'm going to be choosy. I'm going to have to say, I'm going to focus on this device. You know, say there's 10 major ones that come out in the next 12 months, you know, I'm probably only going to pick maybe 3 or 4 of them, the ones that really resonate with me, and I'll have to focus on them. And I kind of get that all the time already. You know, people will email me or text me or, you know, message me and say, hey, have you thought about this device? And it's like, yeah, I thought about it, but I don't have room in my brain or in my time, you know, for that right now, like the GPD devices and things like that. It'd be great, but I think right now I'm good at sticking with what I know, and then just kind of really building something very comprehensive and really deep. You know, I like having that ability to do that instead.
Yeah, the Aya Neo and the GPD stuff is, I mean, not only from like the hardware perspective, but from a budgetary perspective, it's out of my grasp. But it's one of those things, kind of like the the folding phones of the world. It's like I'll sit back and I'll watch it and I'll be like, wow, that's really cool. I'll never be able to afford it, but that's really cool.
Yeah, totally. And to me, and maybe it's just because I'm still in that fanboy stage, but man, I turn on the device and I can play a Nintendo game and I'm happy. You know what I mean? I'm like, man, it's so cool that I can play, Ninja Turtles 2 on my device right now. And that still gives me a thrill. The idea of saying, oh, I want to emulate God of War 1 on the PS2. I mean, I can do that on my PC if I really wanted to, or, I could just go buy a PS2. Like, it's like that doesn't have the same drive for me. I'm still amazed by the little things. And so I really want to kind of keep focusing on that stuff.
So does that mean that you're going to be more focused on $100 below, or like the $100 retro game machines versus the $200 game machines?
I think so. I think what'll happen, and this is, I could be a liar in 6 months, who knows? But I think my approach has been, and even when we had that gaming blog back in the day, I actually, I had a series that I called like Cheapskates. And for me, it's all about value. What do you get most bang for your buck? And so I'm the guy who rifles through the bargain bin as opposed to trying to find the most latest and greatest for anything, for, a GameStop or whatever. That's what I'm looking at, is trying to find something where it's like finally hitting that great mixture of price and value. And so I will definitely probably focus mostly on those cheaper ones that still provide like a good entertainment to people. And then maybe really find one of those nice 200 and above devices to say, okay, if you're going to pick one, this is what you could do with it.
I know what channel I'm watching now. Russ, you're my kind of people.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, the PS Vita was one where that was an investment, where I was like, okay, I'm gonna buy a Vita and I'm gonna spend the money, the $200 or whatever I paid for it. And I'm just gonna really see if this is worth that difference. And I've only made one other Vita video since, because it's just too far out there for people. You know what I mean? There's so many other things I can say. Yeah, the Vita does these things well, but for half the price, you can do 75 to 80% of the things the Vita does.
Still a great device, though, for what it does.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing. I mean, that's when I'm going to grab one to go and jump in bed for a half hour before I go to sleep. 9 times out of 10, I actually grab the Vita.
It's kind of that fit and polish that I feel the closer these manufacturers get to, the more enticing it'll be for a larger amount of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like the Vita. I recently picked up 2 Vitas, and I never even seen one in person, and I'm really digging it. I can understand why people hated it when it first came out because of the expensive memory card, but mine came with a memory card, and it came with the just the right firmware that I don't have to like mess with anything to get access to the homebrew. It's really cool.
Yeah, when I first opened the box, I distinctly remember it, and I wish I had done it on camera. I didn't or anything, but I opened it up one night, and I audibly said, wow, like when I picked it up. And it's so amazing that an 8-year-old device, wowed me like that. Like I don't ever, I don't make exclamations like that out loud when I'm alone with myself. You know what I mean? But I did with the PS Vita. I pulled that thing out of the box and I was just like, holy smokes. It was really impressive.
I had to look up the release date because I'm like, okay, it has touchscreen. It's basically a Switch, but smaller. Oh, wow.
It's funny you say that, but I didn't know I had a touch screen for like the first 10 minutes I was messing with it. I'm like, how am I supposed to make this thing work? I couldn't figure it out. And I couldn't even fathom the fact that it also had a touch screen on top of how beautiful and nice it all felt.
So much you could do with that device. It's a beautiful thing.
Speaking of beautiful devices, and budget devices, I've been really back into Game Boys. There's a bunch of mods that have come out, screen mods and shell mods, and these devices have been out for ages. And when we were privately talking, you mentioned like this is a interesting point, that there's a community of people that are still enthusiastic about these really old game machines.
Yeah, it's amazing. I bypassed all of the handheld era stuff, the Game Boys and Game Boy Advances and stuff. But I'm always amazed at how many people still are really into Game Boy Advance like mods and things like that. It's stood the test of time. Even the original Game Boy, like Game Boy Color and stuff. But I think Game Boy Color came out pretty late, like it was 98 or so. But at the same time, that's old at this point. That's over 20 years.
Do you have any Game Boys? Do you plan on picking any of these new screen mods or shell mods this year?
So I have been thinking about it. There's a user on Discord who he emailed me and he said, "Hey, I've been doing these mods and he's been doing some really special things, and he wants to kind of start a shop at some point. And he told me he wanted to send me one of his finished products, so I could maybe show it on my channel and then kind of drive people to his shop and stuff. And so I've kind of been waiting on that to see when that arrives. And I think he's in Malaysia, so it's going to take a while. When that arrives, I'm kind of going to make a judgment call at that point and be like, okay, is this something I could do too? I'm not a hardware guy. Like I really, I get nervous when I start unscrewing things, but at the same time, like these devices, they're relatively inexpensive. And so if you break it, it's not the end of the world,
Yeah, they were designed for little kids.
That's true. That's a good point.
I washed my original DMG twice.
You washed
in
it?
my pocket. Yes, my original DMG from childhood went through the washer and dryer twice. Worked perfectly both times coming out.
Wow,
after being
amazing.
dried out. That it is amazing that these devices, getting up in age like 20 years old, can take a licking and keep on ticking. And Russ, I'm actually going to endeavor on my first mod, kind folks on Discord. Everybody gets together on Discord nowadays. Ain't it grand the times we live in?
Yeah.
But I have a DMG in front of me. I ordered a gigantic battery and just some circuitry that was recommended to me, and we'll find out. I'll let you know if I burn the thing up, and that'll let you know if any guy can kind of just hack together a custom mod on one of these devices. So
yeah,
if I could do it, anybody can do it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Absolutely. I did early in my channel time, I did a screen mod on my original 350. I bought a 350M screen, and
that's right.
Yeah, and I totally I played it off, but I nicked myself really bad with the scalpel when I was doing it, because you had to like shave a bit of the plastic around the case and stuff. And I'm not kidding. The first 30 seconds that I had the scalpel in my hands, I nicked myself right in the other finger. And I had to take like an hour break, to get it to stop bleeding. And even then, like I had the bleeding Band-Aid in the video and stuff. And that was when I was like, okay, why am I doing this? And that was very early days. And I say early days, but it's literally like September. But I was using an iPad to video with. So I had that propped up by a bunch of my son's Duplos. And so I had like these 3 towers of Duplos holding the iPad up, but like trying to keep them out of the camera, and then like writhing my hands, like sneaking them through these towers of Duplos that are not in any way like stable, and then I'm trying to use a scalpel when I can barely see what I'm doing. And that's when I nicked myself. So it's just a comedy of errors at that point. I should have had a video of me doing that video. That would have been more entertaining, I think.
Fantastic. Sorry.
Yeah, honestly, I laughed it off at the end. I was like, I cut myself on screen or whatever. I cut that part out so nobody actually saw it happen. But, and then I think I did some other things I messed up during that time. And so, I blew a circuit during that time too, because I used a hairdryer. And we live in this old house in Hawaii, and it blew the whole house. And so we had to restart everything. And so it's pretty funny.
That's funny.
How'd you feel after that? Like actually putting everything back together and it worked, and the fruits of your labor, coming to fruition.
It's kind of amazing, It's like, despite like these things, like you can make errors and stuff, and despite all of that, they still comes out with such a better product. I just dropped today. I did a video on the A13, the Powkiddy A13, which is like this tabletop portable arcade machine. And I went and I bought like legit arcade buttons and our arcade joystick and stuff. And this was just last weekend, and I modded it all myself and put in the new buttons and the new joystick. And I also added in a bunch of weights to the bottom to balance it better and stuff. And in all of that, when I was doing it, when I was pulling out the wires from the old buttons, I totally broke a couple of the wires. And I thought I was done. I was like, I don't know what to do at this point. I'm going to have to ask Pal Kitty to send me a whole new unit, you know. But then I like rifled through my tool set and I found other like wire connectors that I could use, and they fit, thankfully. And so I ended up fixing all of it and like getting it all working perfectly. And it was like this huge triumph. And I'm like telling my wife about it, and she's just like, and so it's pretty funny.
That's nice, dear. Go back to your little fun now.
Exactly. Yeah. But she's like, okay, cool. You fixed a wire, but I did it on camera. You don't have no idea, you know. She's like, I don't care. Yeah, my wife's funny because she actually gets motion sickness with any 3D acceleration in any game. So basically everything from Mario Kart and beyond, she cannot play. Like, she can only play like puzzle games and things like that, like Dr. Mario, you know. And so she's got no patience for video games. That's not a part of her life, which is pretty funny.
Same. My wife can't play Mario Kart, but she's been getting into Animal Crossing, which I'm into her playing my Switch.
That's awesome. Yeah, she thought that maybe Animal Crossing would work because it's so slow and stuff, and you just kind of like move slowly through the map. But even that, yeah, she can only do a couple minutes and then she's done.
Do your kids play video games?
Oh yeah. So I have two boys. One is 12, or he's about to be 12, and then one just turned 5. And the 12-year-old, he growing up and stuff, we had that 360, like I mentioned, right? And so his first video game was Fruit Ninja with the Kinect on the Xbox 360, because he could just use his hands and he could like chop the fruit, you know. And his little hands were so short at one point we had him like holding drumsticks, so he could use those instead, and it was pretty funny. But you know, he really didn't get into video games that much until probably only maybe like 5 years ago. So when he was like 7 years old, he started playing. We got a Switch, you know, when it first came out. So I guess maybe only three or 4 years ago. And Rayman Legends was the one that he really gravitated to. He really liked like just the cartooniness of it, and it's a very forgiving game, you know. And so he kind of got all of his chops through Rayman Legends, of all things, you know. We all have our like childhood memories and stuff, and it's funny to think 20 years from now he's going to be pining for Rayman Legends, but that's his game.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because my son, gosh, he was a little more into it then, but he played through Rayman Legends, and that's kind of one of his keystone first games that he played through and beat, and we kind of all of us kind of sat around and, you know, beat that game together. It's one of my favorite memories.
That's awesome. You know, maybe 20 years from now, you know, your son and my son will be commiserating together about Rayman Legends on some podcast.
Yeah, maybe, but he's been trailblazing me. Have you, Russ? Have you had the moment with your son where you're trying to be like, hold on, kiddo, let me handle this, and you can't do it, and then like you just hand the controller back to him and he does it in like 2 seconds?
We haven't hit that point yet. And the only reason why is because he turned like his attention to Minecraft. You know, like he is just like a Minecraft wizard at this point. There's no other game in existence other than Minecraft to him. And so I'm not in that world. And so because of that, we're kind of in different spheres at this point. Yeah, but there were definitely times where he would hand me a controller for something and I'd be sweating it, but I would get through it, you know. And at this point, yeah, he could probably beat me in a few things, I'm sure.
My boy and I are playing Link's Awakening right now, and what's really funny and kind of interesting is with this DMG, I'm getting a original Link's Awakening cartridge in the mail here soon, and I get to like, come here, bud, and I'll sit there and I'll be like, this is how I played it, and look how you get to play it. You're very lucky.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my youngest, you know, he's just turned 5, and when we first got we got not the Nintendo Classic, but the Super Nintendo Classic. When we first got that, which I think was 3 years ago now, right? So he was like two and a half or so. I sat him down, and we were just messing around with it or whatever, and he picked up a controller for Donkey Kong Country, which I remember when that game came out in 94, I was 14 years old, and that game was really hard for me. I don't know what it was, just the timing requirements and everything else. I hated that game, you know. And my 2.5-year-old son picked it up and got through level 1 without dying one time the moment he picked up the controller. Like, he has this natural ability that I never had, you know what I mean? Yeah, I'm kind of jealous of just kind of the world that our kids live in now. This like twin thumbsticks like gameplay and stuff where it's natural to them. I remember when like Half-Life came out on the first Xbox, I was over at a friend's house and I tried it out and I put my hands on the controller and I was like, what is this garbage? You know what I mean? And then like Halo 1, I was like, I can't do this. You know, it wasn't until the 360 came out with Halo 3 that I finally started feeling a little bit comfortable with that controller. But now our kids are just growing up with it. It's pretty crazy.
My 2-year-old doesn't understand the concept of input in video yet. He'll like try to touch it and I'm like, hey, press A now. Okay, now press the D-pad, and he's just like, what? I want a YouTube video. But I play with my kids, my friends' kids, and they play Splatoon. I'm really into Splatoon. It's the only modern game I really enjoy playing frequently, and I play with them. And the younger one amazes me. He's 5 years old. He'll go into battle. He's like the front end. Like he wants to be at the very front of the match, and he's not scared of getting splatted and starting all over. It's like, whatever, like, let's do this. I'm gonna go for it all the way. And I'm like, okay, I changed my position to defense, and I'll keep your back, man. You just go for it.
That's awesome. He's learning about life, you know what I mean? Just
man.
Taking that goal. It's awesome.
No looking back. That's a great place to conclude our discussion. Thank you so much for joining us in this episode, Russ. I hope that you, in this coming year, grow your channel even more. And the only thing I can say to you as these companies come to you for information is, I just want a device that can start up and be put on sleep as fast as possible, so I can get in my game as fast as possible.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, you know, I really appreciate you guys having me on here. It's a lot of fun. You know, it's not often I get to just talk about video games for an hour with people. It's pretty cool. Thanks.
You're welcome on again at any time. It was a pleasure.
With that said, I am Retro GM.
I'm the Nerdy Dad.
And I'm Russ from Retro Game Core.
Be sure to continue the conversation. Oh, what? Oh, forget that.